Some of my friends are like, do you have any cool books we should read? And I'm like, yeah, this book, it's about gays in space. My sister was like, what's that book about the gays in space? And I was just like, Here it is, read it. Hi YouTube, and welcome back to my booktube channel, Books with Leo. So today I have a very cool video for you all because I made my own book tag. I'm so excited. As you can see from the title, today I'm doing the bi or bisexuality book tag, but I just think bi book tag sounds really cool, so we're going with bi book tag. First, bit of a story time. I was checking Boston Reads, or I think that's what her channel's called, bi representation book video, in which he talks about several books that have amazing bi representation, and you should all definitely check out that video because that is what inspired me to do this book tag, because I was watching that and I was like, I want to make this video too. And then I was like, I want to create a tag for this because I know there's like some really cool LGBTQ book tags, like the Pride Flag book tag, which is super cool. I think that was made by Common Spence. Is there a bi book tag? So I went on a journey on YouTube and I was like tapping like bi book tag, and there was no bi book tag, and I was like, I'm gonna make a bi book tag. A little bit of a disclaimer, I have a Dutch booktube channel, and so I also have an Instagram with quite some people that follow me that I know personally or that are also Dutch and that are like surrounding me in daily life every now and then. And most of my close friends and people around me know that I'm bisexual, but I'm not like screaming it at everybody because I sometimes find it really hard to be completely open about it. For example, on Instagram, I do talk about it in my YouTube videos, and so this is the first time that I'm really making a YouTube video surrounding this, so I'm kind of nervous about it. And I didn't want to do a whole big coming out on my Dutch channel because it just felt weird, and I definitely want to talk about it more, but I haven't really. So I felt like I had to say that to you guys. I don't know, that sort of helps me to say that. So I am bisexual, if that wasn't obvious yet. If you're not bisexual, you can still do this book tag if you like it, so don't let that stop you. I think it's just sometimes I think it would be just really important to have some more bi representation and to talk about it a bit more every now and then. So that's also why I created this tag, and also just because it's wild fun. So yeah. So I created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions. That's not super much, but I think it'll be fine because I always talk a lot and I give long answers because that's just the way I am. Let's get into the bi book tag. So the first question, confusion. A lot of people think bisexuals are just confused. Spoiler alert, we're not. But sometimes sexuality can be a confusing thing when you are just figuring it out. Name a book character who's also going through a journey of figuring things out. I think there's quite a lot of book characters that are figuring things out, but I've chosen for a couple of characters that are also figuring things related to sexuality out, and that book is Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. I think the character Aled is very relevant for this question because Aled is also figuring loads of things out related to mental health but also sexuality. So this is an amazing book, but let me tell you a bit what it's about. This book is about Frances, and Frances is a bit of a study girl. She's always studying and she appears to be very quiet, but in her free time she really loves to listen to this podcast called Universe City. And she's like the biggest fan. She also makes fan art for it. And Aled is also a pretty quiet boy, and everybody just knows him as the guy who gets only straight A's, so they're sort of the same alley, you could say. And nobody actually knows that he's the creator of Universe City. And Universe City is this podcast that is like super famous. So these two, they become fast friends in the beginning of the novel, and it's just a novel about their beautiful friendship, but also about the mental health things and the pressure that our society puts on us to be great and to perform well in school and in our university systems is a very prominent theme in this book. And next to that, it also talks about sexuality and discovering who you are as a person. And it's just, this book is such a gem. It is one of my favorite reads, and I love that there's just this beautiful blossoming friendship in it. And that's really rare to read about because a lot of times it then transfers into romance, and that annoys the living hell out of me. But it doesn't happen in this book, so that's really cool. It can be good sometimes when that happens, but it just happens a bit too much, like it's a bit of a trope. It gave me such warm feelings, and I was just so happy reading it, and it's super due for a reread, even though I read it this year. Radio Silence by Alice Oseman. Okay, the next question. First crush. The first queer crush. Name a book with a character in it that totally made you swoon. Okay. I love this one. I think personally this is a lovely question. So for this we're going with The Diviners by Libba Bray, and the character that I'm so gushing over is Theta, and Theta is just, she's so cool. She's like, I can't even. So I think every bisexual person that is a girl has had this moment where they were like, I love girls, I love staring at girls, girls are just so beautiful and interesting, and maybe there's something going on there, or at least I had that personally. So let me tell you a bit about this book, even though I think most people on BookTube know what The Diviners is about. This book is set in the 1920s, which I think is already like very cool. I love historical stuff. And it's about Evie O'Neill, who's been not such a good girl, and that's why she's shipped off to New York because she had a bit of a scandal back home, a scandal involving some cool and occult stuff, and she's put there with her uncle, who runs a weird museum of the occult and magical stuff. But then a serial killer is on the loose in New York City, and Evie discovers that the power that she has could possibly help discovering who the killer is. So this book is a bit of a mystery, it's a bit historical, but it's also funny. So Theda is one of the side characters, and she lives together with this other guy whose name I forgot because it's been a year since I read this and I'm terrible. It's a great book overall. To close this question, I totally want to reference Florence Given for a bit. Maybe it's a girl crush. Maybe you're queer. Okay, just had to say that. Just had to get that out there. Next question. Coming out, that moment when you're ready to acknowledge your sexuality. And name a book that made you want to scream and gush on the top of your lungs about to everyone you know. This one's not hard. It's another Alice Oseman book, and I chose a second book for this question as well because I was like, okay, so I picked 2 Alice Oseman books. But first, I want to talk about Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. I read that one this October, and I'm just, I want to scream about it. So Heartstopper is absolutely amazing. It's about 2 boys who fall in love, and it's about Charlie, who's gay, and he thinks Nick is totally straight, and Nick thinks he's straight as well, but then he starts liking Charlie, and he's confused. And a very big part of this story is about Nick discovering his bisexuality and like doing frantic googling like, am I gay? And like being super stressed and having a full-on gay panic, as he calls it. And to be honest, my life is a gay panic. I related so much to all these parts, and there's also some beautiful parts in this graphic novel that talk about coming out and sort of, you don't need to announce who you are to the whole world as soon as you know. You don't owe it to your friends, your family, the people around you to tell them what your sexuality is. You don't owe it to anyone. They're not entitled to know, and you can just do that at your own pace. And that's such a, like, I know it's a graphic novel, but I was like very emotional reading that part, and it made me realize too that your sexuality is not all that defines you. And yeah, I just thought it was a really good graphic novel. And as a second book for this one, since I've already named 2 Alice Oseman books, I've picked another book from another writer, and that is We Are the Aunts by Sean David Hutchinson. And as it so happens to be, the main character in this book is also gay. So this book is about Henry Denton, and Henry Denton has quite a weird life since he's abducted by aliens every few months. And these aliens, they do all sorts of weird experiments on him, but then they tell him that the world will end, and he has to choose whether it will end or not. If he presses the button, then the world will not end. So he has to sort of make this huge decision. At the same time, he's dealing with quite a difficult home situation, and his boyfriend killed himself a couple of months or years ago. And it's a very beautiful book about mental health and growing up, sexuality, questions you have about life, family situations. It's just a really beautiful thing to read, and it's also super hilarious. It has some dark humor going on, but I totally love that. I don't know. I really like the tension that is built in this book, and the tension is really about, does Henry think the world is worth saving, because he's not sure. So that's really cool. And this book, when I just read it, I was talking about it to everybody I knew. I was like, have you read this book? Do you know this book? Can I talk to you about what this book is about? It's really cool. So yeah, this is totally a book I wanted to gush and scream about to everybody. The next question is recognition. Unfortunately, bi erasure is still a thing. Name a book that made you feel seen and valued, understood. Okay, so first let me talk a bit to you guys about bi erasure, because I think it's a very important topic to talk about. Bi erasure happens a lot when people question your sexuality. So for example, if I would tell someone, hey, I'm bisexual, and they would go, oh, well, have you dated girls? Have you had sex with girls? How do you know? Have you ever had a girlfriend then? And, oh, are you sure you're not just heterosexual? Aren't you just confused? So people doubting you is a thing that happens a lot, or they're telling you, it's just a phase. It's not. That's bi erasure, and it's very problematic. For the book that made me feel seen, valued, and understood, I'm going with, of course, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Guys, I'm sorry, I won't shut up about this book. So this book is about Evelyn Hugo, who's a movie star, and it basically stars her telling her life story to a journalist. And this journalist is pretty unknown, and nobody's sure why she picked that journalist to tell the story. And at the same time, it's the story of her in the 60s becoming a worldwide, amazing, famous movie star, up to the level of like Marilyn Monroe. But she's a fictional person, which is just, if you're reading this, you feel like she exists. You feel like after reading it, you're going to watch a couple of her movies. But you can't because she's not real. But she feels like the realist character. She's also deeply flawed, very interesting and complicated, and just an amazing person to read about. And this is maybe a bit of a spoiler, so if you don't want to know, just tap ahead a bit. Evelyn Hugo is also bisexual, and the biggest part of this story is about her and her biggest love of her life, who was actually a woman. I have some tags in here I've written in this book. It's a very flimsy copy that I have, and I would love to have the hardcover at some point, but now I've just written all over the book. This book made me feel so seen, valued and understood, like the question says. It was just the first time I read something that spoke so truly and so well about bisexuality that was just so relatable to me, even though it's about a famous movie star in the 60s. I will look up some of the lines that were very meaningful to me and read them to you. Maybe if I'd spent my whole life fighting our feelings for women, then I might have had a template for it. But I didn't. I was taught to like men, and I had found, albeit temporarily, love and lust with a men. The fact that I wanted to be around Celia all the time, the fact that I cared about her enough that I valued her happiness over my own, the fact that I liked to think about that moment when she stood in front of me without her shirt on. Now, you put the pieces together, and you say, 1 + 1 = I'm in love with a woman. But back then, at least for me, I didn't have that equation, and if you don't realise that there's a formula to be working with, how the hell are you supposed to find the answer? That's just my entire life. Nobody explicitly told me you have to be straight, but in my surroundings where I grew up, there was like one gay lady, and I always thought, I think until I was 12, I thought you have to be gay or straight and there's no in between. And whenever I would sort of think, maybe I'm gay, then I sort of blotted that out by being like, no, but I like men too, so it should all be fine, because I was a bit stressed about possibly being gay. When I read this, it just felt like coming home almost. I was like, wow, that's exactly how I felt. This book is really a book you should check out. 50-50. Sexuality is fluid, and so is bisexuality. Almost no one is 50-50. What I mean by this is a lot of people think that when you're bisexual, you 50% like men and you 50% like women. Why are they making noise? Like, that's different for everybody, that's very personal, and it's definitely not 50-50. Because in the past I also used to think that, no, I can't be bisexual because I think my attraction to men is bigger, and now if it's shifted a bit. You know, it's not how it works. 50-50, sexuality is fluid and so is bisexuality, almost no one is 50-50. Name a book about which you're unsure, whether you love or hate it, your own 50-50 opinion-wise. So, for this question, I'm going with The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I don't know whether I like this book. I flew through it, I loved it, and I thought it was so nice to read, but looking back on it, it's definitely a bit problematic here and there. So The Cruel Prince is about Jude and her 2 sisters, and they've been raised in some sort of fairyland, and when they were very young, their parents were killed and they were kidnapped by this man who took them to fairyland, and that's where they grew up. And one of the sisters, Vivian, is actually half fairy, but Jude is a full human. And because she's a full human, she has a really difficult time adapting to the fairy world, and she really badly wants to prove everybody that she's worthy and that she can be a knight and she can be kick-ass, but she's very crude in doing so. To be honest, all the fays and fairies in this book are also super crude. I think, by the way, obviously they're fays and it's more of a failand. I think hardcore fans of this book are cringing now by me explaining it, but that's basically what it's about. I love the way Holly Black writes, and I think she has a very poetic way of world building, and it's very natural feeling, so you almost don't realise that there's a new world sort of unfolding before you, and that's really beautifully done. I also love the illustrations in this book, but that's besides the point, I guess. But at the same time, the relationships are bad. There's not always critique towards Jude where there should be, I think sometimes, like some internal critique on the way she acts and the decisions she makes. Like, obviously it's fantasy and obviously she's not going to be like a perfect goody two-shoes, but it's just the way it's handled is not always well. There's some better videos of other people explaining why this book is a bit problematic every now and then, and I'll link a couple in the description if you'd like to know. This is my 50-50 book. I haven't read The Wicked King yet because I don't really feel interested in it, but I might read it one day. Okay, so this is the last question already. Community. Finding your place in a community can be hard. So personally, sometimes I feel like I'm too straight for the gay people and too gay for the straight people. And I think that's a struggle that a lot of bisexual people, or especially the friends that I have that are bisexual, also have sometimes. But what I really want to tell you guys, that in the end, it's all about finding the right people for you, finding the right friends, the people that love you and support you. And sexuality is not the only thing that defines you. You can find your own community and your own circle of people around you in all sorts of places. So for this bit, name a book that has a great group of friends and a great sense of community, and for that I'm going with The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. So I always describe this book as gays in space. So some of my friends are like, do you have any cool books we should read? And I'm like, yeah, this book, it's about gays in space. And lately my sister was like, what's that book about the gays in space? And I was just like, Okay, so this book is a science fiction book, and I think it's one of those books that you shouldn't know too much about, so I'll just tell you a bit of the themes. It's very much about what it means to be a human, because in this book we follow a group of creatures on a spaceship, and they're traveling, and they sort of have this job of boring tunnels and holes into the universe and then sort of making gateways to other parts of the universe. And these characters connect and talk a lot through the book. It's a pretty slow book with a lot of talking and text and a lot of world building about this universe and sort of the culture of the different aliens and species that are living in this world. And there's also some interspecies love things going on and gays going on. And it very much poses the question, what are the values of being a human and of having feelings and living in the world that we are in? And it's also super funny, so check it out. Okay, so those were all of the questions of the bi book tag. Please feel welcome to also do this tag, even if you're not bisexual. Just get out there and make some beautiful representation. If you are bisexual, obviously, you can also do the tag. Everybody's invited. I would love for you to send me links if you do this video. I would love to see. And yeah, I just had a lot of fun creating this tag and looking up some books, but also talking about bisexuality on here and maybe clearing some things up. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to leave a nice comment down below and subscribe if you haven't already, because I'd love to see you here again. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye!